I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, our weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, we're hopping in the car. The bold and the beautiful of the automotive industry get eco-friendly at the Geneva Motor Show. We speak to General Motors' European boss. Also, a spring of discontent blossoms in Kyrgyzstan as the country grapples with huge economic debt. And iPad the sequel. Apple unveils version 2 of the tablet computer, but was it upstaged by Steve Jobs' surprise return? So welcome to the show, everyone, and first off the bat, a big thank you to Hazem Seeker for taking over hosting duties last week while I was on assignment. This week we've decided to leave behind the turmoil of Libya and the wider Middle East and look at some other business news because it does carry on. And we want to start with the car industry, something which took a big hit during the financial crisis. So many jobs lost, mostly in the United States and Europe. In fact, at the end of 2007, the auto sector employed almost 10 million people worldwide, according to the International Labour Organization. It estimated around 1 million jobs would be lost in 2009, a tenth of the workforce. One really tough lesson came out of Thailand, where 59,000 jobs were lost in the first 3 months of 2009. But it's amazing what a year can do. Yes, some automakers were helped along by governments taking stakes or providing cash for clunkers, as they say. But the industry is showing some new strength. Europe's still a bit off, to be fair, but developing markets like China and India are storming ahead. And the US is surprisingly strong. So coming up, an interview with the boss of General Motors Europe. But first, the auto industry's push to go green, seen in evidence at the 81st Geneva Auto Show. Lawrence Lee has our report.
It's the jewel in the crown of Rolls-Royce's race to become green. The Phantom is its first ever fully electric vehicle. Powered by the largest car battery in the world, it uses the same technology as an electric toothbrush.
Our Rolls-Royce Ghost and also our Phantom are class leading regarding emissions and fuel consumption. But of course, when you look long term, I think also Rolls-Royce motor cars need to look into alternative drivetrains. And that's the reason why we are currently doing that research project here.
It costs 4 cents per mile to run. Not that its wealthy customers would be worried with skyrocketing oil prices. But the Phantom is a long way from the production line. It is, as Rolls-Royce CEO Thorsten Müller-Ottfoss describes it, a research project and an experiment.
It might be hybrid, it might be plug-in hybrid, it might be electric. This is what we will find out within that test project here.
Gas-guzzling super luxury brands aren't the only automakers showing off their green credentials at the 2011 Geneva Motor Show. The premium end has weathered the economic storm and has led the recovery. India's Tata Motors, the owner of Jaguar and Land Rover, has its first diesel-electric hybrid.
The Range E is a hybrid, it's a diesel hybrid. It's a V6 diesel engine combined with a strong electric motor and a sizable battery. So the battery via plug-in can be recharged overnight.
With China overtaking Japan to become the second biggest economy, the importance of the market has Tata scrambling to find a partner to keep up with BMW and Mercedes.
And we're talking to possible joint venture partners in China. In order to be able to manufacture locally, you need to identify a partner, and we are en route of doing that.
The Range E is some 2 years away from hitting the road.
Consumers have been expecting electric vehicles on their roads ever since last year. And they were utterly disappointed that they can't buy them a year ago, and they were equally disappointed that they would cost more to buy them at all. So the consumer wants to be painlessly green. He wants to have the newest stuff at the lowest possible price. And it's this expectation management that is now slowly kicking in.
The auto market has weathered the recession. In fact, there was strong growth in the United States, China and India. But Europe remains an area of concern for both luxury and mass market brands. Sales fell almost 5% last year as Europe deals with its debt crisis. This year could see some growth, but that could all be undone by the unrest in the Middle East. But spiking oil prices could be the fuel needed for hybrid and electric car sales to really accelerate.
So let's turn to one of the big players now, General Motors, which was pretty much on the scrap heap back in mid-2009, but looking vastly different now. And joining us from the Auto Show in Geneva is a regular visitor to Counting the Cost. It is Nick Riley, the president of General Motors Europe. Good to see you again, Nick. Probably the third or fourth time I've spoken to you since the financial crisis. This has been quite a turnaround for General Motors, hasn't it? Back from the brink, back from bankruptcy, and back to profit.
Yeah, GM's doing great all around the world. It's turned around. We've turned around the operations in the US, and our international operations are continuing to do really well, particularly in China and Brazil and other places. In Europe, actually, you've got to ask if the glass is half full or glass is half empty. I see it as half full. We made losses last year, as predicted, but they were much smaller than the losses we had suggested over a year ago. And we look as though we're on the road back to profitability quicker than expected. And we've had great reception from our new cars, so we're feeling much more confident.
But what is it then that makes you so confident about increasing things in Europe, given that, as you've pointed out, it has, dragged the chain for the whole GM brand? What specifically are you doing to help Europe come back to life?
Well, we've been through a major restructuring of the organization, which has taken out 20% of capacity, including closing a plant down in Belgium. We've lost a lot of people in the UK and in Spain and in Germany. We still have some to go, but it's on track. And so our cost level overall is down at a level now where we can make money at a much lower industry. And we have to be there so that we don't lose a lot. And when the industry picks up, then we can make good profit. The other thing is we've had excellent performance in our manufacturing plants, so they've taken cost out there, our quality is high, and the new products that we've launched last year, and again we're going to do this year, are receiving really strong attention. We've won many awards, so we're driving it both on the revenue side and also on the cost side. We know what the plan is and we are executing it.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to ask you, because the way you have described it, it seems that it's mostly cuts that have brought about the savings. To that end, what sort of revenue predictions have you got? Because that is what's going to have to drive growth. If you have cut as much as you've said, then you're not going to be able to cut very much more.
That's correct. You can't cut yourself to success. But we have taken the cost down. But the Meriva last year, for example, a small MPV, won all sorts of awards. The Insignia has been on the market for a couple of years, having won Car of the Year in Europe 2 years ago. The Astra has also won the Golden Steering Wheel, lots of awards, high demand for all those cars. We've upgraded our Corsa, which is another high volume product, and we are introducing a new, larger MPV, the Zafira, which a few years ago defined that segment, and it's a very innovative new model. And then finally, we're introducing the Ampera, which is behind me, that is an electric vehicle, vehicle with extended range, so it takes away range anxiety from purely battery electric vehicles. A lot of interest in that. So there's no question that the cutting is almost done. It's the driving for revenue. And I have to say we were very pleased with our market share in the fourth quarter of last year and the first 2 months of this year, where we're up by over half a percentage point in market share.
Yeah, let's just go back, Nick, because I'm interested in that car behind you that you pointed out, the Ampera. How much is one of those going to cost? Who are you actually aiming it at?
Well, this is the first generation Ampera. It's priced at about 42,000 euros, but you take off that the various different incentives that different governments are offering, anything from 5,000 to 7,000 euros. So it comes down into the kind of mid 30,000 euros. That's still quite expensive for a car of that size, but it's got a great drive, and of course the fuel economy depends on how much you drive, but it's incredible. Costs €1 to fill up, to recharge, which means less than €2 for 100 kilometers driving on electric, and most people will drive this car for most of the time on electric, and then when you go on a long distance, it drives further. So there are good cost savings, but no question that the first people who will buy this car are either trendsetters, people who want the latest technology and who are willing to pay a little bit more for it, but also fleets and governments who who want to show that they are supporting a move to more green technologies. Those will be the first early adopters, and then when we bring in generation 2, hopefully the costs will have come down. We can make it a little bit more affordable to the mass markets, and that's where we'll go with Gen 2.
And not a bad time then to be putting out a car that only costs a couple of euros to fill up, because you can't ignore the price of oil at the moment. Given all the uncertainty we see with oil, how concerned are you about the effect that's going to have on the auto industry?
Yes, I am, as I'm sure everybody is. If it does go up significantly, then we are fairly well placed in our offerings, including the Ampera. But what concerns me more is if it's a very sharp spike and it's a supply-driven spike, i.e. we can't get oil out of Libya or somewhere, it'll drive the price up sharply. That will affect the economy generally and the car market. And then you're going to get into a lot of kind of desperate selling as people try to buy market share. And that's never good for the industry's profitability. Typically, though, those type of supply shocks are only fairly short-lived, but I prefer to do without it.
Nick Riley from General Motors Europe there at the Geneva Auto Show. Good talking to you again, Nick. Well, a world away from luxury cars and sustainable energies is Kyrgyzstan, facing a spring of discontent. Food prices are soaring, unemployment is rampant, and the nation is at risk of defaulting on its external debt. Have a look at this from Robin Forrestier-Walker now on a nation struggling to get a grip on its economy.
Poverty flourishes in the shadow of these mountains. The ramshackle town of Akjar, population 15,000, the houses were built illegally on private land by rural poor seeking opportunity, just outside the capital Bishkek. The Doronov family has no running water, no electricity, and no local school to educate the children. Times are hard. Food price inflation is the highest in the region, up as much as 40% from this time a year ago.
After the revolution in April last year, it looked as if the fortunes of the people in this town had changed, because suddenly electricity pylons began to appear. But after the elections and the formation of the new coalition government, the work ceased. And the people here remain cut off, not just from the grid, but from the wider society.
One explanation is that there is no public money to finish projects like this. The government plans to increase the budget this year by up to 30%, but acknowledges substantial problems.
We have a budget with a deficit and a stagnant economy. Our first priority has been to stabilise the economy through elaborate mechanisms that could provide us with results this year.
That includes raising tax revenues, but by some estimates, as much as 70 to 80% of all the money in Kyrgyzstan flows through the underground economy. And critics say this, above all, must be addressed.
They're not trying to, work with the current situation that we have with the grey economy and see how we can attract those businesses, those entrepreneurs, to come into the official sector and start paying taxes.
The quick fix for Kyrgyzstan will inevitably be aid and loans from international donors, but that means continuing dependency and debt, while towns like Akjar remain a symbol of sickness at the root of the Kyrgyz economy.
Now, the continuing unrest we see in the Middle East has its roots in the lack of jobs for the growing young population. Now, the Spanish Prime Minister, José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, says Europe should create a bank to support emerging democracies. Taimour Nabili sat down with the Prime Minister and asked him, was indebted Europe really in a position to create a Marshall Plan for the fledgling Middle East economies?
Tenemos que distinguir dos planos. Uno son el plano de las instituciones europeas.
We have to differentiate between two plans. One is the plan of European institutions and their capacity for financial cooperation with countries in North Africa and the Arab world. And in Europe, we do have healthy financial institutions, such as the European Investment Bank, and the possibility of having a financial body to support countries in the Mediterranean. And secondly, the Marshall Plan, which, with the help of private companies and large international companies from Europe, North America, Asia, indeed from all over the world, could group together to raise investment for countries that are changing towards democracy. And I can assure you that those companies have plenty of resources. They have plenty of money and they can make the effort. We've got to organise and plan for that. But I think there's a huge opportunity to help these countries get on their feet financially as soon as possible, and also for big companies to open up important markets, markets with millions of citizens, lots of them young people, that when the economy picks up will go on to become potential customers and go on to earn themselves jobs and a more dignified quality of life.
I confess I'm a little surprised. Your background in the Spanish left and what seems to be a global feeling of concern about the strength of private corporations these days, and yet what you're proposing is an entirely private sector-led solution for an area like North Africa. As I say, a little bit surprising.
No, a mí me sorprendería si dijera que fueran a apoyar a países ricos.
I'd be surprised if you suggested I was going to support rich countries, but we're talking about countries with a high percentage of unemployment and poverty, like Egypt, where nearly half the population gets by on €1 a day. So it's good that large international companies can invest and create wealth. There's politics and there's politics. Bill Gates is one of the richest men in the world, but he's also one of the men that invests the most in the fight against malaria and hunger. That's forward-thinking politics. What wouldn't be forward-thinking would be for me to ask Bill Gates to invest in rich countries and areas where people have everything they need. But asking big companies to invest where it's needed is forward-thinking politics, and if we achieve it, it will be a really good thing for those countries and their young people. Because as you correctly said earlier, at the moment our countries have huge budget limitations. We have huge fiscal limitations, and big companies are the ones with less limitations because they have more funds and more credit. So we've got to call on them to make an effort, in a social and a historical sense. That isn't easy, but we have to try.
Do you think you are going to be able to guide Spain out of its current crisis? You are still waiting for the banks to come through with a workable plan to rebalance their balance sheets. And your banks are heavily indebted to a property sector that is still going down. On the other hand, you have the ECB in Germany taking an extremely hawkish line on interest rates. And if those rates go up, that is going to magnify your problems. How much control and how much leeway do you have right now to save the Spanish economy?
Sí, seguro que vamos a salir de la crisis económica.
I am sure we will get out of the financial crisis. The economy has already started to grow. We're making large reforms. We're reorganizing the economy. We can guarantee the stability of the financial system, which has held up very well throughout the financial crisis. The Spanish system has a good method of regulation and it's secure. Our big challenge is to complete all the necessary changes. We've almost finished making the fundamental reforms, so now our challenge is to create jobs again, to generate confidence. That's the big challenge. But the stability of debt, the stability of growth, the fact that there's no going back from the recession, and the stability of the financial system, I can guarantee all of those. Now what we've got to do is finance the recovery, boost growth, and create more jobs, which is our main problem. It's been a tough battle. But day by day, we are winning.
To Bangladesh now, where the former Nobel Peace Prize winner Muhammad Yunus has refused to relinquish his post as managing director of Grameen Bank. Now, you've probably heard of Yunus, the father of microfinance, they call him. He set up Grameen Bank to offer microloans to millions suffering in poverty in Bangladesh and beyond. But now the government wants him gone. Charles Stratford explains why.
He's known as the banker to the poor and won a Nobel Peace Prize 5 years ago. The Grameen Bank that Yunus founded has provided billions of dollars in so-called microloans for the most needy. The following allegations first aired in a Norwegian TV documentary that he was involved in tax dodges. The Central Bank of Bangladesh wants Yunus sacked. He was cleared by a subsequent Norwegian inquiry and he continues to deny accusations. But despite that, the Bangladeshi government has launched its own inquiry. And it's not just about money. The central bank claims his age is another factor. He's 70, that's 10 years over the legal age for a managing director of a commercial bank. It adds that Yunus should have sought its approval before he was reappointed to his position at Grameen. And even the Prime Minister has joined his opponents. Sheikh Hasina has accused the Nobel laureate of treating his bank as, quote, his personal property, claiming his group was sucking the blood from the poor. All this has come as a shock to many of his supporters. They claim he's being targeted because of an attempt to set up a political party when a military-backed caretaker government was in power. But as the legal battles go on, Yunus is staying at the bank that's changed the lives of millions and made him famous around the world.
Now, finally this week, the saying goes that the sequel is never as good as the first, but that didn't stop Apple relaunching its iPad tablet computer only a year after creating it. In the end, it wasn't anything major. Version 2 is thinner, it's twice as fast as its predecessor and has 2 inbuilt cameras. All expected changes and nothing terribly earth-shattering. The big news was the man who presented it to Apple's legion of fans in San Francisco and beyond. Tarek Basley has the story.
A surprise return and a standing ovation.
We've been working on this product for a while and I just didn't want to miss today. So. Thank you.
Unsubstantiated tabloid reports said Steve Jobs, the founder and inspiration behind Apple, had 6 weeks to live. In the last decade, the 56-year-old has survived pancreatic cancer and undergone a liver transplant. Jobs announced in January that he would take a 3rd leave of absence to focus on his health. His appearance almost overshadowed the launch of the new iPad 2. It's thinner than the last tablet and has front and rear cameras allowing video conferencing and a faster processor. But Apple can't stand still. The market it created has many competitors, mostly using Google's Honeycomb Android software. The tablet market is expected to sell more than 50 million units this year and 200 million by 2015. Apple sold almost 15 million iPads in the 9 months to 2010, almost 3 times what many analysts had expected. It could sell 30 million units this year, making it $20 billion in sales. And perhaps in a sign of things to come, Apple's smartphone market share is slowly shrinking. According to Nielsen statistics for the last quarter, Google's Android operating system accounted for 28.7% of smartphone sales in the US, surpassing Apple's market share with a jump of more than 7% from the previous quarter. Both are behind BlackBerry. Critically, while Apple's operating system only works on an iPhone, Android can be used on several different handsets and devices.
Google's brilliance here is that they win if there are more people on the internet. That's it. It's as simple as that. Everything they do is through that prism. So what they've done is to create a very viable operating system, the thing that runs the hardware, for both smartphones and now with Honeycomb, the latest version of Android, with an operating system that runs tablets.
Another uncertain factor in the Apple equation is Steve Jobs himself. Despite some shareholder nerves over the company's future success without Jobs, many analysts believe there are others to carry on his work from the top down.
They seem to be very much bought into the message of Apple, the culture of Apple, they know what Apple's trying to accomplish in the grander scheme of things. So I think that they've done such a good job at permeating this culture into the people that it hires that they know where to go next. They know what the vision is. They're bought in.
Apple is still considered the gadget leader, but its competitors are slowly starting to muscle their way into one of the world's most lucrative industries.
And that is just about it for this week. Do check us out online though. Start at aljazeera.net/English. Click the business tab at the top and follow the links to the Counting the Cost page for blogs and episodes in full. And then when you want to get in touch, get tweeting. At KamalAJE is where you'll find me on Twitter. Please send in your thoughts or questions you've got about the show, or just say hello if you like. But that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.